Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. My name is Nimesh Radia, and I'm your host. I always love starting the podcast by saying thank you. I feel so very blessed by this podcast and all the people that's listening, everyone that's been a guest, everyone that's sent us messages, and we receive messages on a weekly basis. Just that I know this podcast is guiding people. My intention when I started it was I really wanted to guide people on their spiritual journey, and it really does lift my heart, my soul, knowing that this podcast is doing it. So thank you. This episode is an extra special episode. It's our 200th episode. So I'm excited to get into it. Quick intro for me. My name is Nimesh Radia. I'm an Akashic record reader, Akashic trainer, podcast host, and podcast creator, as well as a spiritual coach and mentor. I love what I get to do. I get to guide people to shine their light. I feel like we're being pushed in so many ways, especially in 2024, to close our karmic cycles, and so many people are awakening in different ways. And I love guiding people to truly be their authentic self. So thank you for everyone that's kind of helped me on this journey. This podcast wouldn't be where it is today without my beautiful co-host, the stunning, the healer extraordinaire, and now published author, Stacey Brown. Stacey, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, it's so good to be here again. I can't believe that we're at 200 episodes. It's such a powerful time. My name is Stacey. I'm an intuitive. I do readings for people from around the world. I'm also an Akashic record reader, spiritual coach and mentor, and a recently published author. My book, Journey to Soul Center, Discovering the Gift of Surrender, is available on Amazon and Audible.
How do you feel about the 200th episode, Stace, and the journey to get here?
I'm in awe. I'm in absolute awe that we've made it to this place, that I started with you on episode 17. And here we are at episode 200. And I'm proud of us. I'm proud of us that we have stayed so fiercely committed to our audience and our listeners, and that we've been able to accomplish this goal. It feels really powerful. How does it feel for you?
Feels amazing. When I started this podcast, and I'll give people a little bit of history, I had a mentor friend who was guiding me on my journey, helped me to understand the healer I am. We did events around the world together in Hawaii, Mexico, Spain, UK, India. And I really thought that we were going to kind of work together and raise the consciousness of the planet humanly. Her name is Sidra Jeffrey. If you've been a long time listener to this podcast, you've heard me talk about her many times, I'm sure. And she passed away in a fire aged only 38 years old. And I remember exactly that day and everything that happened. But I also remember there was humanly I miss her, but there was a knowingness that came over me that I knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. I knew she could help so many more people on the other side. And I didn't know she's going to become one of my guides, but she is. She's one of my spiritual guides. And she's had a big influence on this podcast. She is one of my guides. She passed away in March 2020. Quite quickly, she started pushing me to learn how to read Akashic records. I didn't know much about the records at the time, and I started listening to podcasts about them, and eventually I learned how to read the records. I learned how to read the records because I wanted to understand my soul contract with her. It was such a beautiful experience. I started reading for friends. I've now read for over thousands. I guided Stacey to read the records too. So for me, the records are a way of building a deeper connection to my guides, to other realms. It's just been beautiful. But through the records and through Sidra, I got the message that my voice is my gift. I need to use it. So I decided to start a podcast as a great way of using my voice, sharing whatever knowledge I have. And I know I don't claim it to be my knowledge in any way. I feel like it comes from different sources, and I feel like I channel it. But I remember when I wanted to start the podcast, I procrastinated. I was like, do I have the right microphone? Do I have the right equipment? Do I have all these human excuses? And I struggled with the name. In the end, I stuck with Spiritual Journey. And I picked Spiritual Journey Path to Awakening in Torna Sidra, as well as it felt right. Has her initials. So her initials are Sidra Jeffrey, SJ. Spiritual Journey SJ. She also had talked a lot about the awakening. She actually wrote a book called The Awakening. So I really wanted to honor her, but I also wanted to make sure it was my voice. So it's kind of like a co-creation, but I really do feel like she's guided me on this podcast. And in honesty, at the beginning, and those that listened to the first few episodes, they were shorter, maybe 15, 20 minutes. I was doing maybe one episode a month. And but then it started to kind of get a lot of momentum. Stacey joined on episode 17, as she's already said. We started to do weekly episodes, and it was just growing. Right now, globally, it's a top 2% podcast. Hundreds and hundreds listen to each episode. I feel so very blessed. And I really do feel like it's guided. So if you're listening here, then you're meant to be here. And maybe the message, if you get one message from this podcast, and if you've been thinking about starting something, maybe the message here is to start it. Maybe you want to start a podcast. Reach out if you need any guidance. We'll be more than willing to help. But after all of that, when did I have the right mic and all that sort of stuff? I started this podcast with some AirPods. I just decided in the end, I'm overcomplicating this. I put my AirPods in and just started recording. Obviously now I have a software, I have a different microphone, all the rest of it. But if you're waiting to start something, then don't wait. We're releasing this episode, 200th episode, just before the end of the year. We just had Christmas. Hopefully you guys, we are recording this before Christmas, but hopefully you had a great festive period. You had some time with family and the rest of it. But this is a beautiful time to be grateful. But my message, as we begin kind of diving into this topic, if you're thinking about starting something, start it. Don't wait. Because your mind talks you out of things. But we're at this period where your voice is needed. So whatever you're thinking you're doing, whatever platform you're going to use your voice to share your gifts, stop waiting and do it. So Stace, what's your message? And this journey will kind of cover where we've been over the last few years. But as we talk about the journey of the podcast, where's it taking you from episode 70 to now?
Wow. I feel like that's such a crazy question because I've been through so much since I joined the podcast, and it would be hard for me to document all of the transitions that I've had.
The roller coaster over the last few years.
Yeah, it's definitely been a roller coaster, but a very powerful one, and one that I'm so grateful I have, like, the trail of podcast episodes that kind of follows my journey, because without that, I don't know if I would remember all of the things that I've been through. But there's been such an evolution through this podcast, and it's been such a powerful process for me. And I think one of the things that I love the most is that we are so genuine with our listeners. And when we're going through something, we're sharing it. We're talking about our real life experiences, and not just focusing on guests, but what we're authentically going through as well.
And that's the thing with this podcast is it's really been a great healing journey for me too, right? It's a great place to, as you say, we just share whatever's in our heart. And when you speak what's in your heart, everything's a co-creation. So it's healing for us too. And the other thing I feel it's done is helped us as public speakers, right? It's helped us to channel messages. It's helped us to kind of really connect with our audience, with our guides. So again, this is why I encourage people that's listening is that if you're thinking of doing something, then do it. Your voice is needed. You don't know where it's going to take you. And if I think about the 200 episodes, I was just trying to look at when this episode I started in October 2020, so it's been over 4 years. But I was just trying to look at the date when you joined. But it really has been life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know because of the messages we get, it's actually been life-changing for some of our listeners too. It's kind of, being that voice, being that guide. And honestly, I really want to stay grounded and humble with it because it's not me. I channel it from somewhere else. I'm sure you do the same, Stace, and everything's a co-creation. So anyone that's listening to this episode, you've helped create this energy. You helped create this vibration. I think about the journey of what's happened over the last two years, and I know I'm a different person, right? 4 years ago when Sidra left this realm, and before she became one of my guides, I left the corporate world. I was fully entrenched in the corporate world. I was probably more human than I am now, and I think about what I get to do now and how different my life is. I'm no longer in the corporate world. I get to do what I love, and I just come back from a 3-week trip to Bali where I truly felt connected to my guides, and I love the journey that the Akashic Records has and the podcast. And sometimes you kind of take it all for granted, and just as we come to the end of 2024 and as we think about the 200th episode, it really is time to kind of look at your journey, see how much you've grown, and be proud. I don't know how often I'm sure I don't take enough time to really look at my journey and kind of accept how much I've grown and truly embrace it. I feel like most of us, we focus on the work that we've still got to do and the frustration and our, kind of the human part of our journey. But I really feel, again, this episode is a great opportunity to just stop and be grateful. Be proud. 2024 has been a roller coaster for everybody, and so many karmic closures, so many friends that we lost along the way, so many soul contracts come to an end, so many rebirths. But how many of us actually stop and be grateful? I mean, Christmas and this festive period is so many people go through extremes, good and bad, and who decides what's good and bad? And beginning of the new year, everyone has kind of New Year's resolutions and kind of maybe a newfound hope or whatever. For me, this is a period where you kind of take stock, maybe journal about what you're ready to get rid of, and really embrace this new version of you. And the 200th episode, by the way, I should have said at the beginning, we have a special offer as part of this 200th episode, and we'll share the details near the end. Obviously, that's encouraging you to listen to whatever we've got to share. But we're excited. We are excited for the promotion and looking forward to it. But Stace, as I ask you about this year and kind of maybe first ask you, how has this podcast helped you? In what ways has it kind of impacted your world? How has it made you different?
This podcast has given me a space to share my journey, which has been really powerful. But the thing that I love the most about this podcast is the fact that we are simplifying spirituality and bringing topics to people that they're curious about, that we've gotten feedback that you want to hear about. And it's been a space where we can process those things without the confines of religion, which I feel is something that is so needed in this world right now. We need a space to be able to explore our spirituality and understand more about who we are and why we are the way we are and how to move forward in our lives. And I feel like this podcast has been that. It's been a space for a lot of people to go deeper in their healing journey. But for me, it's been a space for me to process a lot of the things that I probably wouldn't otherwise talk about. I mean, there are things that I've shared here that I haven't shared with my own children. And that really says something about what we're doing here, is that we've provided this safe space for you to understand more about your journey. And I couldn't be more grateful that I have a platform where I get to do that, where I get to understand more about myself and unpack the things that are happening in my life and take a closer look at them. I wish that for everyone. I just feel like we're lucky enough to have the podcast to do it.
That's so very true in terms of having that platform. And again, take this opportunity to thank all the listeners, because we do get a lot of feedback and we do get a lot of messages and ideas on kind of certainly early on in terms of the topics we should talk about. And just, and Stacey, I got a lot of messages about people liking our dynamic, right? In terms of how we interact, and people always connect to your vulnerability. And I've always said that your vulnerability for me is one of your superpowers, because your ability to kind of go deep and tell a story and take people on a journey, like they feel like they're actually there with you, is super, super powerful. So again, I want to thank you for being part of this journey. I'm not sure, I can't remember that was March 2022. I'm not sure back then if we really knew how much of a partnership we were going to form, right? In terms of doing mentorship together, in terms of doing this podcast together for now, what started in 2022, so it's now going to be nearly 20, so it's going to be 3 years, and it's kind of been I guess I never knew when we became friends how much of a roller coaster it's going to be, and we joke about it quite a lot, right? The roller coaster and kind of, but I am super grateful. I feel super blessed, and please, people, listeners, just keep sending us messages about the topics you want us to cover and the impact we're having. It really, really does help. And the other thing I think about is the power of consistency. One of the things we talk about quite a lot, Stacey, is always showing up. And that's our commitment to the universe, right? Is going to keep showing up, wherever the universe is going to take us, however we need to show up, we've committed to continue to show up. So I really, when we committed to doing weekly episodes, I didn't realize the impact that was going to have, because there was times when I'd be loading a podcast and thinking, well, maybe it's okay to wait for a day, maybe it's okay to. But I started realizing, because of the messages I was getting every Monday, that there's actually people that wait for me to release a podcast on a Monday morning, which actually to me is crazy, but it's beautiful as well. So we've committed to consistently show up, and yes, that's just on this podcast, it's social media, it's all the kind of mentorship and everything we do. That's our deal with the universe. That's our deal with our guides, is we're going to keep showing up in whatever way we can. And the universe take us wherever we need to go. And, we committed to a weekly episode. We've been doing that for a while now, every Monday. And then more recently, we started doing 2 episodes a week, one with you, Stacey, and one with a guest, as well as the monthly Akashic message. So there's kind of, it is an undertaking, but we love it. It's our way of giving back. And but when I talk to you about your superpower being vulnerable, and your ability to share from the heart in every episode, how does that make you feel?
Well, it's so hard because I sometimes wish that I wasn't so vulnerable. I sometimes wish that I wouldn't be so raw, because it comes from a heart-centered space, and sometimes it's extremely painful. But I also know that it's had an impact, and that our listeners really appreciate the authenticity. And I want to be as open as I can. And I'm embarking on more change right now. And what that's going to look like and how it's going to play out, I don't know yet. But that our listeners are going to hear all about it, because I don't know how to be anything else but me. And, I have my son to thank for that, because 5 years ago, I experienced some of the deepest pain I've ever experienced when my son tried to take his own life. And yes, he survived and he's thriving, but it has taken me a really long time to recover from that trauma and to heal that part of myself. And I think part of the process was my vulnerability opening up and not being able to kind of filter what I say, and through that, I think we've gotten a lot of warm reception about it. I mean, people have said they really do appreciate how open I am, and I want to continue to be that way. And it's something I don't really try to do. It just happens.
Hmm.
Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure which.
No, it's authentic, right? And I do feel that both of us. I talk about this podcast all the time. We don't script anything. A lot of the times, we may pick the topic ahead, but we don't script anything. We don't. Whatever comes through, comes through. So there is only one way we can be, Stacey. You being authentic, and I feel like we help people understand they're not on their own.
Hmm.
That
And
we're
that's
all going through something, right? We're all a soul having a human experience, right? And it's that human experience that is here to challenge us. And so many of us are going through so many deep lessons right now that, just even if we help people understand they're not on their own, that everybody's going through something,
hmm.
and, creating a community, and just, it's so beautiful.
And that's so
Yeah.
interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I think about with this process is when I was going through my awakening journey and I was trying to navigate understanding spirituality, how different my life would have been if I had a podcast like this to listen to. And I think that on a regular basis, like the content that we're bringing to people is something that everybody can benefit from. We've talked about having regular habits and how important that is. We've talked about different modalities. We've had guests on here coming from different walks of life, sharing their experiences and the impact that it's had on them. Like the power of this podcast is mind-blowing. And it is hard to wrap my head around the fact that something like this didn't exist before us. Like it's, I know this is a space that's very unique and different than any space I've ever been in before. And I feel very grateful that we've been able to give that to our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's lots of spiritual podcasts out there, right? So thank you to all the ones that listen to this one. But we're super protective over this podcast. I'm not sure we need to be, but we don't place adverts on it. We do talk about our products and how the services that we offer. But we've resisted kind of adding adverts and things like that because this is our way of giving back. And I think about all the amazing people that we've met along the way. On the 100th episode, we kind of did like a tribute one where we invited some of our clients who joined from the podcast to kind of share some of their journey. And I think through all the people that we've met on this podcast, all the clients that we've got from this podcast, and seeing their journey, seeing how much they've shifted, seeing how much they're shining their light, seeing how many of them have become friends, right? How many of them we may not still be a client, but we still reach out and we stay connected, and because we know we've got soul contracts with them. And I love how this podcast has kind of guided people to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the beautiful connections we've had. So many clients have come from this podcast. And the work that we do is we don't fix anybody. We guide people to truly understand who they are. And this podcast is kind of a doorway into the work that we do. I know there's lots of people listen to the podcast and don't ever book a reading or don't ever ask about mentorship. But I know because I get messages that they listen to every week, but there's others that do reach out, and it's a soul contract, and there's a divine timing to it. And I just know that if somebody is meant to work with us, they'll find us. But I really feel that the podcast is a beautiful way of connecting with us and really kind of understanding what we do. And we added the monthly Zoom call. I think we added that last year at some point. So we do a monthly Zoom call where you get to experience what we do in a different way. You get to join us and kind of join us live and feel the energy, that vibration. But Stacey, when I ask you about all the people that we've met, the clients that we've met with this podcast, and how much they've helped us, because everything is a co-creation. All the people we've met along the way that have become clients, they've had a profound impact on me. And I feel so very blessed. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, the number of stories of people stumbling upon the podcast is pretty crazy to me. Like, I was hiking through the mountains and your podcast came up, or I was taking a walk in the park and randomly I heard my phone in my pocket and it was your podcast. Things like that blow my mind. The number of people who have just come in contact with us in some way and said, I want or I need more, and have booked a session with us. I think the other thing that cracks me up is the people who meet us and have this like fan moment where they're like, it's so cool to like to see you guys, and you know what I mean, like because they know us.
Yeah, and then they've been listening to us in their heads so many episodes.
Yeah, they've been listening
Eating
to
us like crazy, right?
Yeah. And that's really special too. I mean, I've loved meeting every single one of you that we've come in contact with. And I know that there are more who have been listening, who will book sessions with us and spend time with us coming soon. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's next. I'm excited to see what's next for our topics because, we don't script anything. We go by what we feel. I'm excited to see the feedback that we continue to get from our clients and our listeners. And to me, like, we're just getting started, like I really feel that way. I feel like there's so much more ahead for us.
Yeah, and it's this episode and thinking about the 200th episode has really touched my heart because it's made me think about all the people, as he talked about, there's the client that was on that hike in Sedona. I remember it really well, and was looking for some music to play on this hike on Spotify, and somehow instead of playing music, Spotify decided to play our podcast, and that just led to an incredible journey. And I also remember the client that met us at the Mind Body Spirit. I won't name her, but she, I remember how excited she came and she gave you a big hug, and you weren't sure who she was until she said. It's just like, it's so beautiful, and it's just the fact that people are used to hearing us on a weekly basis, and I just, I'm so very, very grateful. I've shared my story many times, but growing up, I didn't really have a voice, and now having a platform where I get to use my voice every week is just amazing. Mm-hmm. And then I think about all the guests that have been on this podcast, and all the other healers that we've given a platform to share their story. There's so many healers, and I call them generally healers, but whatever you want to call them, healers, trainers, gifted people, whatever you want to say. But it's so amazing to just talk to so many people who are just trying to shine their light. Mm-hmm. Again, I feel like any guest that comes on this podcast is guided to it. And just so everyone knows, we do have a vetting process. Everyone that comes on this podcast has to have listened to at least a couple of episodes. Obviously, I need to have a powerful story. Need to resonate with what we do. So I'll always have a quick conversation with anybody that wants to be a guest. And if they resonate, if I feel like they'll be good for them, then sure, they can be a guest. And with the blessings of Source, God, whatever you want to call it, there's always people wanting to be a guest on this podcast. So I feel very, very, very blessed with it. So, with the guests, again, thank you for everyone that's guests on this podcast. You've helped us. You've shared your vision, your knowledge, and I'm excited to have more and more guests on this podcast. So the other thing that this podcast has done has been a platform for our gifts. When I think about the journey with Akashic Records, and just when I started this podcast, actually, I was quite early in my journey with Akashic Records, and now doing a monthly message channel through the Akashic Records. We do the monthly Zoom call. I feel like it's been a platform for us to develop our gifts as well as, guiding other people to develop their gifts. So, yeah, the Akashic Records as an example, I feel so much more connected to my guides with channeling that monthly message, channeling message that we do on the Zoom call. I feel so much more connected to my guides. When I talk on this podcast, it comes from a different place. So again, when you do what you love, it does connect you with your guides at so much of a deeper level. So again, I keep encouraging everyone that's listening to really ask yourself, how are you at this period when we're going through rebirth, a transition, and we're coming to a new year? How are you choosing to serve? How are you going to shine your light? What does that look like for you? How do you, Stacey, in terms of your gifts, I've seen how much you've developed as a healer. It's kind of easier to see it when you're looking at somebody else, but I've seen how much you've developed as a healer, as a gifted, Akashic record reader. So I've seen how much it's helped you. I've seen how not just the podcast, but you showing up in the way that you show up has really helped you develop as a healer. I'm curious how much you've seen that in your own self.
I think that I see it at certain times, but I also think that it's powerful to go back and listen to some of the older episodes and hear myself and where I was in my journey and kind of how I've developed and evolved over time. And I think it's another thing that I'm grateful for is that I have this kind of tracking, where I can measure my growth by the episodes and how much I've shifted. If someone had told me a couple of years ago, even that I would be doing healing work on this level and that I would be helping people globally and that I would be using my voice to make an impact, I don't know that I would have believed them. I don't know that I would have seen the power of what we're doing. But when we sit here and talk about it, I'm definitely aware that this podcast has helped me to have a place to witness my growth. And it's also given me a space to process things that I might not otherwise process.
So beautiful. And think about again, going back to the journey, some of the people that joined us on this podcast, and some of the people that kind of joined from the podcast and now the Akashic record readers who are now mentors in their own right, who have left the work that we're doing to kind of create and activate the healers in them. It's so beautiful to guide people to be their authentic self, and I love that we get to do that. So, Stacey, bring you on the spot. How do you feel this podcast has affected me? What changes have you seen in me through this podcast?
I feel like you've gotten even more comfortable using your voice. I'm not saying in the beginning that you necessarily held back, but I think that you've gotten more comfortable with like how we do things and sharing who you are. And I definitely think that vulnerability encourages vulnerability. And so I think that some of that has come out in you as well, sharing your journey as a child, things that, again, like me, I don't know if you would have shared with just anyone. And here we are sharing with the world, our stories and what we've been through. So I feel like it's really grown you. I think even behind the scenes, the quality of the podcast has improved because you've pushed yourself to give our listeners the best experience possible. So I think in all the ways, it's pushed you to be a stronger healer, a stronger mentor, and a stronger voice.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. I do try and do the best that we can with this podcast in terms of equipment, software, everything else. And I'm excited, right? I want to give our listeners the best experience that we can.
Mm-hmm.
So we invested in mics and all the rest of it. And yeah, so thank you for those kind words. And I'm excited for whatever's coming, right? Even in our own lives, for me personally, my deal with God, with Source, with my guides is, I know things are shifting for me, and I think there's things are evolving. I'm just going to keep showing up. And this podcast is one of the ways that we're going to keep showing up. So as I feel and think about the plans for this podcast, we're going to keep showing up. Still doing 2 episodes a week, having one with a guest, one with Stace. And for me, it's working. And, what are the plans for the podcast? Keep doing what we're doing, I guess, is the way I'd say, is that, when we want to get more insightful guests, I really feel proud with the guests that we've already had. Me and Stace will go deeper on topics. Me sharing my vulnerability. I don't actually mind sharing anything. I feel like I'm an open book, and I will continue to be as vulnerable as I can be. If my story helps and inspires people, then I am more than willing to share. I feel like I'm an open book. I also feel like when I'm in this podcast, when I'm sharing, I do go to a different place. So sometimes I'll go off at a tangent and talk about something, and I'll feel like I'm being guided to do that. So I also, thank you to our listeners, thank you to our guests, but also thank you to our guides. I feel so guided with this podcast, and I talked a lot about Cedra. And before we started recording, I invited our guides in. We always do kind of a grounding, and I did thank Cedra. Right, so Cedra, I want to publicly thank you on this podcast. You inspired me to start this podcast. I feel like in some way you guided me and Stacey to work together. I feel like in some way you guided a lot of guests, a lot of clients to this podcast, to us. So again, I want to thank you, thank our guides, and thank all the beings that have kind of pushed us and nudged us, and not just us, but all our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. How much do you feel guided by this podcast, Stace, by your guides and any beings up there that are guiding us and nudging us and forcing us along the way?
I feel so guided. I feel like every episode we go by what we feel, not what we think. And I think that that's a powerful space to be in. I believe that, our process, like we do a little grounding process before we start every episode, just like we do before we start every session with our clients, to center ourselves. And I think one of the things that I really admire about us is we try our best to set everything aside and really focus on our listeners when we're recording and making sure that we're providing them quality content. And I feel like we've done that. I feel very supported by my soul family. I feel like I was led to you. I feel like at a time where I wasn't sure how I was going to navigate the future, God placed us in each other's lives. And I'm just so grateful because out of it, I have found a forever friend and someone that I feel aligned with in our vision for the future. And I know that we are really committed. And I just feel that, like out of this has been like so many good things have come from this. We've met so many amazing souls, but it's the initial connection between you and I that I'm the most grateful for, that we have what we have and that we get to do what we do. And who would have thought that we would have a Hindu, Indian, British guy in the UK and a former Mormon in the US
Yeah.
working together on a spiritual podcast, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's
That's
so
crazy.
crazy. And yet here we are, and we're having such an impact. And though we have such different stories and different experiences, somehow we have come together in such a unified way.
Yeah,
And it's like, it's just such a beautiful thing. It just goes to show that you can come from different walks of life and find a common ground with people if you choose to.
100%. I mean, the souls are different to the human, right? And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I definitely feel blessed with our connection states. And I definitely feel it was a soul contract that we're meant to meet, right? And just, but yeah, it's just all the topics I think about and just how much it's helped us and as well as the listeners, soul contracts, dark night of the soul, Akashic records, just self-care and the importance of self-care and meditation, and multiple times we talk so much about the records and just knowing and understanding that we're a soul having a human experience and how much that human experience is important. Talked about rebirths and kind of all the things spiritually that we go through to really help us understand this human experience. And when I started this podcast, my objective was to really, you mentioned it earlier, simplify spirituality and to guide people on their spiritual journey, because I really do feel sometimes we complicate the spiritual journey.
Mhm.
And it's simpler, but a lot of the time it's acceptance of who we are, acceptance that we chose to be here is a big part of it. And yeah, actually, Stace, the one thing we haven't talked about, the impact of this podcast. You're planning on moving to the UK, and I'm sure you met your partner at least the beginning of the journey from this podcast.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest change of life that you could ever talk about, right? That's you're planning on moving countries based on somebody that met us through the podcast that we worked with, and we became friends with, and who's now your partner, and just doesn't the universe work in really strange ways?
It's so mind-blowing.
Just
I still can't even wrap my head around it. And, I'm going to be embarking on some big decisions, and I'll be talking about them openly here. I'm planning a trip to the UK. I leave January 8th, and I'm planning on staying until April. And all of our podcast episodes will be recording. We'll both be in the UK, and I'll be talking about what's happening. And my goal with our listeners is to be as open and authentic with my journey as possible. And so as I embark on this next season of change and all that entails, I'm going to continue to be open and sharing the journey.
I love that. Yeah, and it's really interesting with this podcast. I feel like we live our lives publicly, right? And I'm your world is definitely shifting, and mine. 2024 was a big shift when I left corporate to kind of focus on the healing, and you're now moving countries, and again, this platform guides us to guide others that everyone's going through a shift and not alone. And I'm excited for where this podcast continues to go, the guests that we have, the topics that we talk about, everything spiritual connected. And I do feel like the plan is shifting, and I feel like the spiritual guidance that we share is going to be more needed. Whatever topics come up, it's always channeled. So I'm excited for what this podcast brings, and where if anyone has any ideas, any topics you want us to cover, any guests you feel would be a good guest, then please do reach out. I promise you we'd try and do the best with this podcast, wherever we feel it needs to go, wherever we channel, we're very protective over it. But if you do have any feedback, please do let us know. We encourage it. And so as we close out this podcast, I mentioned earlier we have a special offer. So as part of the 200th episode, what we thought we'd do is we'd offer 5 free joint Akashic record readings. We picked 5 because 5 is a magical number for us. Both of us were born on 5th, so different months of the year. I was 5th of April. Stacey's 5th of September. So, but 5 has been an important number for me all my life. So I thought 5 was a good number. So during the Akashic Records with me and Stacey, normally $222. And we thought as part of a celebration for the 200th, we'll offer 5 free readings to 5 listeners. So what you need to do is follow both me and Stacey on both of our Instagram accounts. You'll find the links in the show notes, and send one of us a DM. And the first 5 messages we get, we will do free joint Akashic record readings for. And what does a joint Akashic record entail? We will take you through a guided meditation. We'll talk about the records and what they mean. We'll take you through a guided meditation to cleanse our energy. We will open your Akashic records, and we will both, me and Stacey, will both channel a message from your guides that you need to hear. It's a very protected and safe environment because you're protected by your guides. And then you get to ask any questions. I mean, Akashic records are really a journey about more about what your soul's been through, past lives, and kind of maybe anything you're holding on to karmically. We help and guide you to connect with the records. There's no guarantee what's going to come through. We are in many ways a vessel, but we want to offer 5 free readings. We love opening. So anyone whose records we open, we feel it's a soul contract. But we thought that'd be a beautiful thing to offer as part of this episode. How does that make you feel, Stace?
I'm excited to see who follows us and who reaches out. And I'm sure it's going to happen fast because this offer doesn't come around all the time. But this is a process we love doing, and we want to do what we can to give back.
Beautiful. And like we said, for the first 5 that message us, you message us, you DM either me or Stace, we'll send you a link to book. And we're going to cap it at 5. So if you listen to this episode, don't wait, don't think about it, reach out to us straight away. Honestly, it's a blessing. It's a very protected environment, so you have nothing for you to worry about. If you're listening and something in your heart tells you to reach out, then I would definitely follow that nudge. And so Stacey, as we close out this episode, 200th episode, the next one will be in 2025. Any messages for our listeners and any kind of general prompts you want to leave our listeners with?
I'm just so grateful to be closing out 2024, and I'm sure some of our listeners are feeling the same way. My journal prompt to you would be, what are you leaving behind in 2024? And what are you looking forward to in 2025? Give yourself some space to process that as we say goodbye to another year and welcome in the new. I am really looking forward to welcoming in a new year.
Thank you, Stace. And again, thank you to all our listeners. Thank you to everyone that's here. What Stace says is really important. What are you leaving in 2024? Why don't we use this end of 2024 and into 2025 as a great way of just releasing an old version of ourselves and embracing the new. And New Year's resolutions and all that sort of stuff is important, but I feel actively choosing what you're leaving behind in 2024. By the way, that includes soul contracts, that could include people, things that you do regularly, the things that you watch. What are you letting go of? And how are you going to embrace the new version of you? Is such a powerful question. Sending you so much love and light, wishing you an amazing end of 2024. Truly hope you embrace 2025. Lots of love and light out to everybody, and bye for now.